Merhabalar.
Hello everyone. First of all, I'd like to welcome you all. My name is Sabahattin Öz. I am from the Ministry of Energy and Natural Resources, and I am the Director General of Renewable Energy at the Ministry. And in this session, we have the chance to discuss what the wind legislation look like after 2020. When the schedule was prepared, when the draft program was prepared, it was like the future of YECDEM. However, you heard from the minister that we will not have YECDEM in place after 2020 as it is right now. But we're using it for solar and wind, but also for geothermal and biomass resources. And it has a bonus. This is the local equipment procedure, and if YECDEM does not work, we will not be able to provide local products. We will discuss and evaluate what kind of changes will happen in this field, but we know that the renewable energy support mechanism is based on a law, and there is a general revision in this law because you know that it was enacted in 2005 and it was revised with the law number 6094 in 2010. So there is a general amendment in the law, starting from the definitions and with all the procedures in it. And we do not know what the name of it will be and whether it will stay or go. But the parts about the local products and resources will be addressed. And in this session, we will not focus on YECDEM after 2020, but we will focus on the wind energy legislation after 2020. And we know that this law is a turning point, and with a cabinet decree, all these procedures are changed until 2020, and we need an amendment for this, and probably in the first quarter of 2018 we will start taking the opinion of the industry. We have 4 panelists. Mr. Mehmet Acala, General Manager of Borsani and BW Energy. Sorry, I skipped the first panelist. To my left, we have Hüseyin Vatansever. He is the President of Energy Industrialists and Businessmen Association. They produce equipment. He is the president, he is the CEO, and then the third panelist is Ahmet Tohma from Guarantee Bank. He is a project finance director, and he will give us some information about the financing of renewable wind projects. And finally, we have Süleyman Boşça. Many of you know him. He is the president of Energy Law Research Institute. So first of all, I would like to start with Mr. Mehmet, and he is representative of a company that took active part in a recent competition, and we will try to focus on what will happen after 2020 in the wind energy, and what kind of procedures should be in place, and what could be the improvements in licensing. We would like to get your take about this. Thank you. When we look at history, maybe we should start with history, and although our topic is YEKDEM, maybe it will be useful to have a general overview of the legislation. The first large auctions started in 2011, and after that a significant number of wind power plants started to operate, and at that time the tender procedure was a bit different then, and there was a pay which would conclude the competition at that time. And when we look at the average price of electricity, it was around $7.3 per dollar cent, and this was the market price. And until 2015, no one really felt the need to make use of YEKDEM, except for a couple of people. And always there was a discussion why it was so low, and the idea behind it was that we know that all these projects need financing, and when the banks provide you loans, they want feed-in tariff, and they believe that this is going to be useful. Therefore, there was a better chance to find some affordable loans, and we see similar projects today. And starting from 2015, there was a significant reduction in electricity price, and we know that the dollar Turkish lira parity was impaired to the detriment of Turkish lira, and if you're not using any local equipment incentives, $7.3 is very attractive. It's around $4.5 cent level, and you get 1 or 1.5 fold back. And it was also important because all the investments at the time were financed in line with the conditions of the day, and all the agreements were made accordingly with the banks. So $7.3 cent acted as a real guarantee, and I suppose there are not many investors who are having difficulty to pay their loans, to pay their debts back. There could be some technical problems, but I don't think that there is anyone facing challenges because of the market conditions. So what will happen from now on? Because we have been discussing this for the last 2 years, and YECDAM is considered as a heavy burden, and who should be the one to shoulder this burden? And of course, we are all taxpayers, so we pay for it one way or another. And this is a discussion that started after 2015, and once the electricity price dropped, and once everyone started to utilize YECDAM, we need to make a distinction here. Because of some mispractices in the legislation, hydroelectric power plants can make use of YECDAM, and they constitute a majority. And besides, we have the wind and geothermal and solar and other sources, which can also make use of YECDAM system at different levels. And when we look at their unit investment costs, they are different from one another. And when you look at the operating cost of a geothermal power plant or a hydroelectric power plant, they will not be the same. So, while taking incentives into consideration, we need to focus on all these parameters. YECDAM was very useful at the time, and this is how we reached today. Otherwise, those investments wouldn't have been made. Today, we have lots of projects that were realized thanks to YECDAM. Because I remember that our price was really high as well, and all these projects became functional, and financing was also provided for those projects. So this is the aim of incentives. You're trying to give these incentives so that you can pave the way for investments. I believe it served for the purpose. So what will happen from now on? We offered some ambitious prices, and we had YECA, it was 3.48, and therefore today, $7.3 is disturbing figure, and after the minister's announcement that YECDAM would be abolished, we believe that it is disturbing for many of us. But now we need to look at why these prices dropped. And when we look at the tenders around the world, and there are some more radical ones in the solar energy, we see that the prices are close to market prices, and even sometimes lower than them. And there are some rationales behind it. The first one is technology. There is a very rapid improvement in technology, and in the past we had new turbines at certain intervals, and the new one has a lower cost and better efficiency. This is how they appeared, and now it still goes on, and there is an increase in efficiency by 20% every 2 years, and we have a minimum of 10% reduction in investment costs. Of course, we see the reflection of this in the market throughout the world. Today, wind energy and also solar energy, although it's not at the desired level, are not among the energy sources that need incentives. And there are some tenders or auctions in other countries that provide market prices for the offshore power plants when compared to the onshore. And we see that this is a reality, and we also need to remember and understand that we have not yet used the most productive areas or sites. We have some very productive sites, and when we look at the onshore power plants in Europe, you can see the values that you couldn't have dreamed of before. And with the new technologies and efficiency levels, we can have a capacity over 45%. So the power plants will be working at full capacity almost half of the year. It's possible to do that. And when compared to the past, the capacity factor in Turkey is around 30%, and with these favorable sites, you have the chance to generate 1.5-fold more energy. And this is the rationale behind the drop of prices. The same thing applies for TWEC auctions, and I believe that the consortium that won TWEC had a very high capacity function, and this is why they went down to such low prices. And we have LCOE parameter, which is important in all these auctions, and the cost of energy when you regenerate it is very important. Of course, you have the investment cost and you have the operating cost, and other than that, you have the financing expenses. The most critical point today is the cost of financing. Ahmet will be talking about this, but at this point, we may see some problems coming up because we have a better technology and we have better productivity and lower operating costs. And now we have a very, very low cost of energy generation, but the cost of financing is to the detriment of the investors in recent years in Turkey. Incentives for the local equipment is very important, especially to have technology transfer in Turkey. And it is discussed that this is going to be a separate incentive from TWEC. This should go on. But if we keep it at the current level, it will not be sufficient to cover the additional cost of financing. If there's going to be an arrangement, my opinion is that we should have TWEC, we should keep it, and it will be a facilitating factor for the risk assessment of financial institutions. For instance, if it is $4.5, if the energy sale is $4.5, it will be useful to have TWEC in place. But if it's not going to be there, the incentives for local equipment should be there, because the local equipment also brings along another cost, that is the turbine cost. So if you provide it from Europe, it could be at the same level maybe, and maybe lower than that. But local finance is much more expensive. So we need an incentive to eliminate the difference in between, and I believe it will be useful for future investments. And finally, in the calculation of energy unit price, we foresee many factors. We know that we anticipate that the operating costs are going down and etc. But We have the official costs that are rising from the legislation. Those could be the system utilization costs or the afforestation costs, or that could be the imbalance costs, and there could be some changes in those parameters. And now we are discussing about the capacity costs and their reflection into the generation. If this happens, we will not be able to reach the result that we calculated, and therefore the legislation should take into consideration all these factors, because now we're making a calculation, and it is 25% of our operating costs, and this is the costs raising from the legislation. These are about the utilization of the system and afforestation and etc. If those costs increase in an unforeseeable way, then we will see the reflection in our costs, and it means that we will have projects that will be hard to finance. So I believe we need to be careful about this, and people should not be thinking that we have given so much money with the ECDEM and let's take it back, because everyone is paying their debts, and I hope that this will not happen in the future. Thank you very much for this time.
So, briefly, he touched upon very, very important issues. ECDEM was low at its inception, of course, and you're with us. I will never forget this, Erol Demirel. I'm talking about you. We were at this meeting, and you said we better call it YOKDEM or NODEM because nobody's using it, or we could call it YEK-MADEM, which would stand for Spiritual Support Mechanism for Renewable Energy. That was your proposal, and we laughed a lot about it, I remember, in those days. But now we are questioning what the ECDEM is and how it should be. But at the place where we're at now, it's not only about costs that we question the ECDEM. It's not only about costs that incur, but we also talk about YEKA and other auctions, which make such a query, so to speak, such questioning more meaningful. Things that should not be a part of the ECDEM. We questioned this a lot. We discussed this extensively at the beginning when the ECDEM was being incepted. But there are hydropower plants financed by international agreements with great potential, with great capacities, and since you have international agreements on the basis which are superior to national law, so there is 600 megawatts of hydropower plants which are bigger than what's defined in the legislation. So the costs, the costs that are incurred are enormous, and as the minister says, YEKDEM is meaningless now, or almost becoming meaningless for sun and wind. But we would like to extend the microphone to Ahmet. I would like to ask him the question and ask him that he explains us, clarifies for us certain things. As our energy generation costs are going down, our financing costs are going up. Maybe we have, similar to PTP, we have YEKDEM, and about wind specifically, it was about 7.4, and the unattractiveness of the price, I mean, it was even below the market price. I don't think it will happen again. I mean, will there be a base price for wind and solar? I don't think within the scope of YEKDEM it's different, because it's an entirely different competition or an auction system. So, as I said, generation costs are going down and financing costs are going up, and after 2020, how are we going to support wind investments without any incentive prices? That's the fact, and let's take into consideration this fact and what's going to happen next after 2020. Yes, how will wind projects be financed in post-2020? Ahmet Tolma from Project Finances of Garanti Bank. Thank you, Sabahattin. Well, let me at the very outset say that about this sector, if you allow me, I would like to take you back 10 years. When we look at 10 years ago, it was 2008, let's say, in Turkey, in 2008, 200 billion kilowatt hours was the consumption in Turkey, half of which came from about 100 billion kilowatt hours, came from natural gas. And then we saw at the time a gap in supply, and the sector required critical investments in this regard. And in 2016, the consumption has reached about 265 billion kilowatt hours, with an increase of about 40%. And natural gas plant generation remained the same, about 100 billion kilowatt hours. So the excess of 75 billion kilowatt hours is the increase in supply, which was remedied about 18 billion kilowatt hours came from wind. And without these investments, this means that without these investments, last year, generation from natural gas would increase by 18 billion kilowatt hours. So this corresponds to some 6,000 megawatts. And how are these plants financed? Thanks to the past TWEC legislation, thanks to the visibility, envisageability, foreseeability, investing environment. And these plants last year generated 18 billion kilowatt hours, corresponding to some 3 billion cubic meters of savings in natural gas, which equals to 800 million US dollars. And this saving is going to continue. And there's another perspective. These plants, if they were not operational, in place of these plants, if we had natural gas plants, electricity price of electricity last year would be not 4.5 but 5 cents. So, in the spot market, there's this balance here. We have TWEC portfolio, put it aside, and YECTEM put it aside. We have some 150 billion kilowatt hours, 120 billion kilowatt hours, and the price would be 0.5 cents higher. This means that we would have had to pay in excess of an additional 600 million US dollars. So we talk about 18 billion kilowatt hours, and what's the additional price? Around 400 million US dollars. So this means that in Turkey, even now, thanks to YECTEM, there is this investment, there is savings in natural gas, and it has repercussions on total electricity costs in terms of bringing these costs down. So it has a net gain in Turkish economy of about 1 billion US dollars, and YECTEM, in brief, can be said to be the best option for the last decade. It has provided great benefits to the Turkish economy. And what's going to happen in the next 10 years? What's going to happen in the next 10 years? Mehmet says technological advancements, developments, very fast curb the costs of these plants. And capacities are going up very rapidly. In 2007-2008, per megawatt investments in wind plants was about 2 million US dollars. Today it is about 1 million, or well below 1 million US dollars. The same thing, the same recession goes for solar as well, and very dramatically so. And within the framework of dynamic conditions, the public incentives or incentive schemes provided by the public should be updated. It is also natural when these plants, these investments are financed, but financial structures in the long term are required. In the near past, as I said, about 9 billion US dollars of investments have been made, 7 billion US dollars of finances have been provided, and out of the 7 billion US dollar finances were at installments beyond 10 years, because investment costs of the time, and when you put them into your feasibility report, it would be reimbursed in 10 years. The level of prices that would be reimbursed in 10 years was not even 7.3. And even some projects, them was being considered as the worst case scenario, and base scenario would involve a couple of more cents on top of them because spot prices were even higher, and that's how we did modeling at the time. And them, as Mehmet said a moment ago, as a part of financing, it was as a fuse, a security, or like an airbag, if you like. And now, as I said, in the near future, if the new power plant investments, if we will need finances for at least 10 years or beyond, we must ensure foreseeability. And in order to ensure foreseeability, we have to act independently from the price. 3 cents, 4 cents, 5 cents, whatever. But independently from that, we have to have a mechanism in place, an apparatus, which is foreseeable. And maybe YECA is the best option now, because the price coming out of that demonstrates that these technological advancements, the yield and the high productivity, high efficiency of these regions are even below spot prices, plus in comparison with other types of resources, wind is far more competitive. So after 2020, the new license auctions, if it's going to happen, it shall be done auction-based. Such competitions should go on, auctions should go on, but the most critical part is that just like in YECA, there has to be a certain amount of installments, payment periods. That is to say that agreements have to be established. Instead of project-based fixed prices, the efficaciousness of the project has to be assessed, the efficiency, whatever, as a whole. And maybe you'll be talking about 2.5 hours, cents, whatever, and in a less efficient project, we will be talking about 4 cents. But if you come to us, to the banks, with a request for finances, we think about 10 years, 12 years, 14 years to provide finances, and it can go as up as 15 years, including the construction of the project, construction phase of the project with YECA. So the banks, in order to be able to ensure a foreseeable cash flow and enable ourselves to request less investments from, less costs from, and less guarantees from, or in order not to ask for additional guarantees from the investors, we have to be able to foresee and envisage what's going to happen. Let me give you an example. So far, the finances that have been provided, I'm saying this in the name of my bank, Guarantee Bank, because we are a critical player in this regard with a market share of 30%. At the operational phase, the finances that we have provided, almost all have gone to running costs, which is based solely on project revenues. Such financing apparatuses we provide, and capital shares are variable, long credit amounts between 25, 30, or 20-25%. But this is done on grounds that foreseeability is ensured. And in some transactions we have gone even beyond 14 years. But if we don't have that foreseeability feature there, we are responsible to our shareholders. Our shareholders' money is translated into loans. That's how we work. When equity ratios are high, and that's one of the biggest problems in Turkey, because capital build-up in Turkey is not so much. Capital is so precious for new investments. Capital holders' capitals have to be utilized optimally. That's one. And second, that brings us to the issue of additional guarantees that will be requested, which will scare away domestic as well as international investors, which will prevent or curb their appetite from new investments. So the most important or the greatest expectation that we have from the legislation post-2020 in the new apparatus to be built for new licenses, permits to be handed out, if that's going to happen in the form of auctions, as it is now, YECA is a great example. A foreseeable cost structure, price structure should be there. It can be high, it can be low. We don't have any expectations in that regard. It should be competitive on the basis of the feasibility of the projects and on the basis of the benefits on the country's economy, national economy. But in order to come up with long-term project financing schemes, foreseeability is a key word, so that we'll be able to establish a foreseeable cash flow. That's the greatest expectation that we have. Thank you. Thanks, Ahmet. It's an important thing, it's an important issue, existing license auctions. There's a model for that, you know. There is a model, it's in the legislation, there are certain articles, and there's an implementing regulation prepared in line with this, and most probably, I think the number was 2,290, and I think the number is reduced, but those auctions waiting in the pipeline will be carried out in a similar fashion, because at this pace we won't have much of a chance to remedy or amend the regulation. But YECA, I think the name is new, but the practice is not so new as its name. We don't call it ESA or power sale agreements, but the system in place is similar, and it will be assessed and considered within a similar framework, and in order to be able to come up with foreseeable prices, well, that's the objective, was the main objective of the YECA system. In the upcoming, in future auctions and licensing transactions, that they should be carried out in a similar fashion. I think it's on our agenda, on our plates. We are discussing this, and we are happy to hear you say similar things. Now we are jumping to, or shifting to a different but a similar topic, which is a part of what we've been talking about. Local produce incentives applicable for the YECTAM. And in Turkey, there are very, very, very significant developments. YECTAM maybe is fulfilling its mission now, but together with the YECTAM, we're thinking about domestication, for example. The equipment domestication, and some incentives and supports which must continue. Yes, they have to be sustained. It's a new thing for many modes of production, and we are at early stages in wind, for example. We are for very long years manufacturing towers and pals, and for the last couple of years the numbers increasing, and in Turkey, turbine suppliers, these two main components, actually they have manufactured in Turkey. UPS companies are in place, and YECA, as you know, offers on the global level 60 to 70%. It requires 100% domestication or national produce. And this concerns the sustainability of the market, which requires the support or incentivized local produce. And the industrial infrastructure is critical. For example, power equipment or critical components of wind turbines and localization. Once we were formalizing these regulations, we always work with the industry. What are we capable of manufacturing? For example, wind turbine component manufacturers, if you go out on the market and look for it, you don't find many. There's only a handful, maybe. But there are people who can do that, who have the infrastructure, who have the capabilities and skills, and they require minimum, maybe, revisions, but still we have them, those people, those industrials. And recently, NCIA is one of the associations that's established, and Hüseyin Vatanseven is the chairman of the board of this association. And we are asking you now, sir, how this support should continue, especially about the production of wind turbine components. What are the latest developments? Could you please elaborate on these issues? Thank you, Chair. Distinguished participants, dear friends of clean energy, please forgive me for my voice. I have this flu. It's not going away, but taking my voice away. Sorry for this voice, but still it gives me the opportunity to thank you once again, the organizers, for this opportunity to address you. So I would like to welcome you once again, say hi in the name of our association, and SIA, which stands for Energy Industrialists and Businessmen Association. There's an increased awareness about this issue and sensitivity about renewable energies. That's the last year for you. We are leaving that behind, and we are happy that main industry and national industry of local renewable energy as the stakeholders in the last decade we have carried out significant work. Yeah, we have accomplished great tasks together. That's what I think. And it was not long ago, it was 2007, just a decade ago in the wind industry, we only had 146 megawatts, 146 megawatts of installed capacity, which multiplied by 48 times, reaching up to the threshold of 7,000 megawatts. Well, it is important. It has to be important because it's a great result. It's a great achievement. And 10 years is almost nothing. It's not a long time, and in such a short span of time, I think it's a good result, and we applaud that. We applaud that on our feet. Thanks to the Ministry of Energy, renewable energy investors, the industrialists, and the local administrators, they all deserve a good and warm thank you for their support for having handled this achievement. But still we have a long way to go, and I should emphasize this. Yes, we have a long way to go. Of course, the strategic plans of the Ministry of Energy, when you look into those plans, you see that all the sectors of our sector, all the actors of our sector agree on this. 48K wind energy potential, only 15% has been and is being utilized. So there is still a long way to go, that's what I mean. Long distance to be covered. This very year is of historic importance for wind and solar. And we have witnessed these developments together. Let's remember, in wind and in solar, both 1,000 megawatts each have been allocated for auctions. TWEC auctions took place. And these auctions, the winners of these auctions, we celebrated them in official letters or through official correspondence because in terms of mother industry, we think this inception, such a starting point, is critical. And here's our perspective, as always. One is always greater than zero, and this is one of the greatest tasks in our lives, is to make zero one, to turn zero, to turn the round trip into a stick. So that's what we are working towards. It is important, and it all boils down to TWEC within the framework of our sector. So, having said TWEC, if you allow me, I would like to share with you a couple of pieces of data from the Ministry of Energy. In the first 9 months, 535 megawatts of wind plants have been commissioned. That's a critical number. 530 something. In comparison with 2016, there is a relative downfall. Yes, a relative downfall, but in the same term of the same year, of the last year, 735 megawatts have been commissioned. We see that, yeah. But still, we're on the road, taking steps forward, and we are not giving up, continuing our efforts. As NCA, the wind energy potential in comparison with the official records, we think it's well above 48,000 megawatts. And our expectation for wind is to tap into new potential and to identify new potential areas. As Mehmet has emphasized in his speech, that these measurements are carried out in wider scopes, in wider areas, in a more planned fashion. So, until today, in wind, there are areas which have not seen investments. I mean, some fields, green fields. In the offshore, we are at ground zero. I mean, even behind the starting point. I mean, thinking about Denmark or northern countries, they are well advanced in the offshore arena as well. And there are lessons that we will draw from that. So we have to tap into these issues, move into that ballpark. Onshore, maybe you think it's too early for us to proceed into onshore, but think about the last 10 years, how fast things evolve. I mean, if we start today, we will have covered further ground in the future. The earlier we start, the further we go. And from this perspective, onshore potential is estimated to be around 10 million kilowatts. I think it's going to come up. Turnout bigger than that, involving further capacity, we believe, because Turkey is surrounded on 3 sides by sea. And 10,000 megawatts, I think, is a small potential. Yes, 3 seas, being a peninsula, brings about more possibilities. And post-2024 REACTAM requires taking into consideration certain issues, a couple of issues, which are, I would like to share with you those now. In recent years, in wind turbine technology, there is mind-freezing developments, and efficiencies have gone up, costs have plummeted, and $7.3 guaranteed prices is now high. This is what this picture shows us, and the current prices should be caught up with, I think, instead of $7.3 in Turkey. ECA price is taken into consideration other auction prices in the world. And I mean, it's well below market prices of projects, and it is the financing capability so far. So 2 main issues under REACTAM: base price and kilowatt per kilowatt, $7.3 per kilowatt hours. Both can be pulled down. Both can be pulled down and attached someplace so that they're stable. And it is possible, we think. REACTAM, as I said, stands on 2 pillars, and there's another one actually, supporting domestic manufacturing practices. The main vision, the main objective of our association is exactly this, and that's why this is a critical topic for us, and that's why we support this with all our might. About the continuation or sustenance of existing support, yes, we support that idea as well, but differently from the Ministry of Energy. I think it is a topic for Ministry of Economy or Ministry of Development, whatever. The industry has to be supported, and we are working to ensure that, really doing so, especially about supports to UPSs or pulse or blades. In our region, there's a blade company in Bergamo Organized Industry Zone that has made a great and critical investment, and inshallah, we're looking for further investments. ECA winner, that consortium, will be investing there, and we are happy about it as well. So at the end of the day, such direct investor support, so to speak, such direct support to the investors is critical. Our slogan is no production, you only dream about development. So production takes place in factories, employment will be cut down in factories. How are we going to develop our technologies? How are we going to educate and train our human resources at the factories as a part of R&D activities, etc.? So direct support to the industry. Minister of Industry, Minister of Economy have to take this, put this food on their plates, consider this issue. I mean, it's the most critical sector, it's the most critical topic, not even important, it's beyond that. So tangible steps have to be taken, solid steps have to be taken, or otherwise time is running out. How about local incentives, Exim Bank loans provide you foreign opportunities? I mean, if there's any, that's one of the questions. Will it go for production? Will it go for manufacturing? Because local producers will not be producing for in-country, but also exports. They will be producing also with a concern for exports. So it's going to be a food on the plate of Exim Bank, and General Director of Exim Bank, a big brother to me, Adnan Yıldırım. I'm working with him, negotiating with him as well, discussing with him these issues very closely in order to be able to carry out or make new investments, or paving the way for investors and providing them with support that they require and facilitations. Yes, this should be done also. This should be done about new investments being made, about manufacturing and production, revving up, using what's produced at the plants, and grid connections are faced with some legislative issues. It's no one else but us to solve, to overcome these challenges. We all have pure intentions, and we emphasize this, and it's visible on our faces. We know the problem. We will come about to the solution. The sector's task, and together with you, Selahattin, together with the Ministry of Energy, we will overcome these bumps, these challenges, solve these problems, because with clean intentions, with pure intentions, it gives you a head start, almost about 51%. So, pure intentions, we will do so. And it's evident. Local contributions until end of 2030, some plans will be carried out, which will be subject to such incentives. But not 5 years, but 10 years, I think, should be better. It would be better so that the investors, people will be able to see and plan and come up with a time plan, work plan for them, because 5 years is too short, because 2 years are spent for investments and you have 3 years left, and in 3 years such incentives lose their allure. So 10-year projections would be better for investors so that they'll be able to see further into the future and be able to plan further again into the future. I think it's going to be the kind of impact that's going to come out of such consideration. About YECA auctions, and it was last April that we shared with the entire public, and we have received most positive feedback. Let's take a look at very briefly into that details. We say YECA. We are applauding and celebrating 10,000 megawatts of YECA. Yes, it's good, but still there are smaller examples, smaller YECA auctions, as is the case in other countries. We want to see such, for example, 100 kilowatts, 500 kilowatts YECA's renewable.
Açıkça bunu söylüyorum.
I mean, what we are asking for is positive discrimination for renewable energy resource areas. That's what YECA is. Otherwise, we can evolve into a side industry, but we want to remain as the main industry, modern industry. This is a strategic topic. Before coming to this meeting, I went to TEPA. There was a seminar there, a panel, let's say, about domestic components. And these things are spoken about in Ankara and elsewhere, and that makes me happy as a brother of yours for the last 10 years, because it's been my life's purpose. And I am happy in this regard that we talk about localization of renewable energy components and equipment, and with Ozcan, we attended that meeting, and he sends his regards and gives good news. And the minister's declaration, Mr. statement today about YECTAM, he says it's going to change, transform, but not be handled. But dear guests, at this very stage we are sensitive about another thing. Turkey maximizing its wind potential. It has to be supported as well. But still, although we support this, we are at the early stages at the wind energy market of Turkey. And this is what TEPAV report says. It's a valuable report. You should get that. You should get that report by TEPAV. It focuses on our foreign dependency in wind especially, which is very, very high, and there are very interesting numbers in that report. You'll be able to see, once you get the report, you'll be able to see those numbers and figures. Now, let me get back to where I started, 7,000 megawatts wind power capacity. Well, from the manufacturing perspective,
Potansiyeli.
We have a potential of investment around 7 billion euros until 2020, and our government provides the highest level of incentives for these investments, and we hope that our local industrialists will make the best use of them. And we want Turkish engineers and workers to be more involved in this industry, and this critical industry can be an answer to the employment for our university graduates, even not for all of them, but some of them. Of course, we had a detailed analysis here, and the companies that won YEKA auctions will use turbines over 4 megawatts, and this is what we learned from the press, and we pay great attention to R&D centers. And the annual budget of the R&D activities and equipment investments are significant. And for the first year, $2 million will be allocated, and for the second year, $3 million. And it's important to have R&D investments, and there is a requirement to have white and blue collar while you establish your factory. And I would like to say something. When we visit our members, we observe the same thing. The name of the company might be an international name, and most of the employees are Turkish by even 90%, and some of them are totally made of Turkish employees. So we say that if a company is producing in our country and creating added value for our country, making employment for our people, and having a positive value in the exports of Turkey, all the companies doing these are considered as local companies. And I will just go a little bit faster to make a better use of my time. I'm skipping this part. I would like to highlight another important point, and I believe you are sensitive about it as well. As you know, TWEC, the Turkish Statistical Institute, announces some figures such as 13% of employment throughout the country. And I spoke to the officials of TWEC, and I told the same thing to them. I multiplied this number by 2. And when they say that we have exports that are around $1.4 billion, I divide it into 2. And when I tell this, that their numbers are a bit exaggerated, so they sometimes smile at me. And we have the construction, energy, and other sectors, and according to TWEC, well, let's say that the value of kilogram exportation of all our products is $1. Is around $1, and in Germany it is $4.1, and in Japan it's much higher. I have the figures, but I will not give you the details. It's much higher compared to Germany in Japan, and Germany is 4 times higher than Turkey. And on the other hand, I also would like to give an example. that these values are taken from the manufacturers in the ground, and this is their calculations. And if you use the glass fiber for a blade, it is around $7.5 or $9. But the figure I gave you was just $1. So if you say that the cost of a blade with glass fiber is $8, so it's 8 times higher. And if you use carbon fiber for blade, it is the cost will be $13 or $14 per kilogram. So it is 14 times or 13 times higher than our production. And our industrialists say that I cannot compete, I cannot invest, and I cannot increase employment, and I cannot make money. I was among them for a while, and I understand them. And we need to raise an awareness among our industrialists, because we have a critical industry here, and we will have an equipment production potential of $40 billion until 2030. And I keep telling this to my colleagues as well. And shall we still struggle with $1 per kilogram? We need to make a decision about this. Shall we bring it up to $8 or $13 or $14 per kilogram? So what should we do? We need to revise our current production techniques and try to transform our business. And with these procedures, with these figures, it's not possible to compete in anywhere in the world market. Therefore, we pay great attention to this, and local equipment production is very important. We're talking about wind today, but the same thing goes for the solar energy or for biomass. We see the products with high added value, and the same thing goes for the wave energy and etc. Therefore, we see the same thing in all forms of energy. For this reason, we have NCA, and we're trying to achieve this. And as an association, we would like to have your support, and we want to have collaboration with you and to make ourselves heard so that we can achieve developments in this field in a more rapid manner. Thank you very much for your attention, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much, Hussein. Let me wrap it up because we have limited time. I would like to give the floor, first of all, to Süleyman, and then I will try to wrap it up. He is the last panelist, and he is a legal person in the field of energy. So my question to you is that what are the deficiencies in the renewable energy legislation, and the current renewable energy legislation, and what are the points that needs correction? Thank you very much for giving me the floor. I would like to extend my greetings to each and every one of you. And before speaking about the YECA or YACTA after 2020, I would like to try to develop a few points that are deficient in the current procedure, and then I will try to share my opinions for the period after 2020. I know you're running out of patience, therefore I will try to keep my speech as short as possible. As you know, once the law is enacted or in 2015 in May, it then faced a revision in 2010, and For the license owners, we have the chart 1 and chart 2, and based on these charts, some prices are applied. And the enterprises use this charts on calendar year. If you would like to take part in the ECDEM, you can only take part in it in the next calendar year. So until 31st of October, you need to make an application to the Energy Market Regulatory Board. And there is an arrangement in the legislation. If you would like to take part in the ECDEM before the full operation, you will use the prices for 10 years that are in the chart 1, and you have 5 years to use the prices in chart 2. And it is said that the production facilities should be partially or fully operational as you take part in the ECDEM. So with this arrangement, we know that there is a difference from the law, and it just narrows the scope of the law, because by the date of application, if you're not fully or partially operational, and if your facility will be operational in the relevant calendar year, we need some clarification whether you will be able to make use of ECDEM or not. And you know that such applications are rejected by the board, by the agency, and these are brought to trials, brought before the court, and we know the attitude of the courts, and we know that it's a debatable issue, and investors pay great attention to this date. They want to make use of ECDEM, and we know that there is a huge debate ongoing about this date, and the courts are dealing with this right now. And we have the Prime Ministry and ministries and some other parties have the right to enact regulations, but those regulations should not be contradicting with the enacted laws. And unfortunately, this arrangement in the regulation gives you the chance to take part of ECDEM if you apply before 31st of October. However, it has some contradictions with the enacted laws. Therefore, no matter how much this regulation is in place, the date of function or operation should be taken into account if you want to make use of ECDEM. And we see that this regulation is still in place and in force, and we also have the law as well, and they are contradicting with one another. And it is said that if it's not annulled, then you cannot annul the procedure that is carried out accordingly. So there is a definitive need for an amendment in the regulation. We know it from the court decisions as well. Another point is the capacity increase. If there is a capacity increase, what will happen? From the date you first get your license, it's possible for you to increase your capacity, and in such a case, how will the ECDEM mechanism function? I mean, will you be able to make use of ECDEM prices starting from your first date of operation, or will you use the remaining time for your capacity increase, or will you have a renewal of the period in which you are making use of the ECDEM support? And we know that the date the facility becomes operational is taken as the basis. So if you increase your capacity, again, Article 6 of the law is taken as the basis, and all of this should be considered as a production facility, and the date of first operation should be taken into consideration. And we also have some rejections regarding the applications for local equipments, and similarly, court verdicts say that we need to take the date of first operation as the basis for this process, so that we can correct the wrong decisions. And I'll try to answer the question, what kind of regulation will be made after 2020? I believe that it will be discussed in the next couple of years, but first of all we need to focus on why we have YECTEM and what it serves for, and whether we still need it or not. And for all forms of resources, we cannot give the same answer. I mean, it cannot be the same with the solar or the wind or other forms of energy. And it could be different for the wind, it could be different for solar or geothermal energy resources. Therefore, if there's going to be a change in the regulation, this distinction should be taken into consideration. Another point is about financing, whether it will be possible to have a foreseeable price. And we know that the bilateral agreements should be more common in this market, and we need to have a bilateral energy market here, and the reference price should be created in the industry, and we can have a more competitive market accordingly. And if you have questions, I will be happy to answer them. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you very much. I can quickly wrap it up, and we can proceed with the Q&A session. We have 15 or 20 minutes more, and if you have too many questions, we can continue because we have time until the cocktail. We know that the date of first operation is very important, and it's not totally clarified by the regulation. As for the capacity increases, we are not very clear whether it will be considered as a new function or as a new facility when you increase the capacity. And if you think it separately, then you will require another license, but we consider the facility as a single entity with a single license, and this is also a debatable issue, but we have taken notes about them. I have a couple of things to say to Hussein. We have 48,000 megawatts of wind potential, and this is based on the wind atlas data. And currently, we are trying to revise this atlas and to see the current figures. And of course, offshore is a part of this capacity, and our onshore capacity will also be discussed. And when we look at the incentives, direct incentives to the industrialists, of course, it's not directly related to the Minister of Energy, but it's not only related to the Minister of Energy, but we know that renewable energy is an important part of the energy sector, and we had the local product incentives, and we have achieved a great deal of things in this small sector. And it disseminates to other sectors as well. I mean, we have it in the energy sector, but we have it being disseminated to the other sectors, and we are shown as the best practice for other sectors, and it's something that we're proud of. And we have the incentives or subsidies from Exim Bank. We know that renewable energy is a very new sector in Turkey, and we have some very new developments, and I believe that we need to change the classical mindset when it comes to financing, because there are some economic developments that are not under our control, and we should be acting in a way that will not increase the financial costs. And we have a very high potential in Turkey. There will be some new developments, and some people say that we don't need YEKDEM, and we can even pay you more than you give us. And we see such industrialists in Turkey. So the realities of Turkey are not as they are seen outside, and we know that those who provide the money make the rules. Therefore, all these issues should be discussed at the banking level, and we can discuss it with our national banks, whether we can do anything about it or not. And now it's time for questions and answers. Please introduce yourself, and please tell us who you're asking this question to. We do not have much time. Maybe we can keep it 10 to 15 minutes longer, but please be precise and ask your questions briefly, and if you do not ask all of them to me, I'll be happy. First of all, I would like to thank TWEC for this organization. I am dealing with renewable energy, and I'm the energy consultant of a holding. I would like to ask you a question, Mr. Sabahattin. As you know that we are talking about 4 megawatts or 6 megawatts and etc. But first, when Kemal Zorlu established Alaçatı, it was 600 kilowatts, and we don't have kilowatts anymore. And now we have the large facilities, but we also need to focus on the small-scale ones. You know, I spent 18,000 liras for 2.5 kilowatts, and I worked hard for it for 3 years, and the regulation now will not allow you to do something like this if you try to do so. What will happen with the regulation? The other question is to our lawyer. It is called competition. Is it competition or auction? Why did we change the name? Can you please bring some clarification to this? Why it's called auction or competition? Of course, the name is not important. The content is important. Competition is the auction is a competition method, because there are several participants, and they make demands, and one of them will be chosen. Therefore, on one hand, if you get offering a high price, or if the other one is offering a lower price, one of them could be chosen. I don't think that we should be confused by the concepts or by the terms. You can call it any way you like. When you say auction or tender, it has a huge law, tender law. We are not included in this law, and we are not subject to public procurement law. This is why we call it a competition. And of course, when it comes to the roofs or the small-scale enterprises, we know that for wind we have facilitation opportunities. For instance, last month in Ayaman in Ankara, we opened a high school This is called the Sustainable Energy Vocational School, and we have a small wind turbine, and they have a capacity of 120 kilowatts, and we worked hard for it, all of us, but we couldn't make it accepted. We know that the system is running, but of course the TWEC will approve it, and TWEC will make the necessary procedures, so it takes time. And even if you do as the ministry, you cannot shorten the process, and you cannot do it in 10 or 20 days. So if there's a regulation, we need to abide by it. But I definitely agree with you. If you say that there is a wind turbine of 1 kilowatts, of course there should be support, there should be subsidies for them, and of course, our aim is to make it national rather than local. And we know that 8 out of 10 large turbine manufacturers competed in TWEC, and one of the largest ones won the tender. And they will produce wind turbines in Turkey, and they will still stay in the Turkish market after they complete this tender. They're going to establish an infrastructure. And but what we are saying here is that we want the Turkish industrialists to manufacture these at a local level, and I believe that they can do it, and hopefully we can maybe call it the national color, like the white or blue color we have. We can make a definition about this, and we can have those colors. And yes, we have the roofs. These are a different topic, and we're working hard on the roofs. Thank you. Yes, please. My name is Ayfer Adıgüzel. First of all, I'd like to thank the participants. I'm here to represent Turkish law, and I'd like to thank TWEC for this event, and our panelists predominantly talked about financing and legislation about the local production in Turkey, and we have covered significant ground in Turkey in the field of wind, and we have a huge potential, and for this potential to be utilized, we have a long journey to go. We agree with that. But for local and national products to be produced, we have a question about the national wind project, and as Turkish law we are engaged in industry and also in the maritime sector. Maybe you know about it. We have the national ship project, national vessel project, and with this project we are aiming to create our own national values, and we have exports to Pakistan and other countries in billions of dollars with all the production and certification we provide. Therefore, for us to create national projects, can we have a renewable energy project that is similar to national vessels, and can we create some clusters, sector-specific clusters, by using this national vessel model? Because even if you provide financing, first of all, you need to have standardized production so that it could be possible to produce it at local and international platforms. Of course, I would like to receive your take about this, Mr. Sebahattin and others. You said national vessels. We have national vessel production. We have MILRES and MILGAS and MILHAS. These are national wind power plants and solar power plants and etc. Both of these projects are going on, and the tests are going on as well, and we need to underscore that you can do all these things. We have projects that are ongoing in coordination with TWEC, and we are manufacturers of some of those projects, and there are some people who know about these procedures, but we have a question. We don't have a question mark about as to why we carry out R&D activities. You can do anything by forging your powers, but of course there should be industrialists for it to be sustainable, and there should be people who are concerned about these matters, and there should be people who are spending money on this. We have lots of projects like that. We have projects with TWEC and other organizations and agencies, and TWEC says that you can get your project, but unfortunately, no one clearly knows who this project belongs to. Therefore, especially for MILRES, we have a private company in that project as well, and there is such a deficiency. And in the second version, the first version was 500 kilowatts, and the other one is 2.5 megawatts. The second version is 2.5 megawatts, and we also would like to have private sector engaged in this project, and maybe it will be similar to our project, but this was just an attempt have manufacturers that have built the designs for turbines that have a capacity of 1 megawatts, and I hope we will achieve this. I would like to make a contribution here. We are working with the Izmir Development Agency. We are in coordination with them, and with regards to clustering, we know that NCA is an association established in Izmir, but we have industrialists from all over Turkey, and we discussed all these things with Sebahattin as we established the association, and Izmir Development Agency submitted a project with a good budget to the ministry, and last week we had a delegation, an international delegation, to supervise us, and I believe that we probably scored at least 7 out of 10 for this project, and it's not clear yet, so I cannot frankly explain it, but we will work in this sector, and we pay great attention to the matter of certification. We will work on certification as well, and there is also a school and an R&D center that will be used jointly by the industrialists on common grounds. We will also focus on this during the discussions, and let me correct something that was misunderstood. We said that we want smaller collars and smaller yekas, but we want yekas which utilize turbines with lower capacity, such as 300 kilowatts and etc. We have lots of figures in energy, so the terminology can be confusing. Thank you.
Buyurun. Please, then Cem. Mehmet Kıvanç from Kıvanç Energy. My question is for Süleyman. I don't know if I misunderstood, but October 31st, I think that's the date. I mean, the participation, right to participate, the law provides for that, but the regulation contradicts with that you're saying, have you? But here is how it is. The law, I mean, start from the date of enactment of the law. I mean, the law provides for facilities that are commissioned until 31st of December 2020. It allows for making use of YECTEM, and the details are provided in the implementing regulation, which is under the law. But what is specific about the implementing regulation is that these regulations cannot be in contrast with the law. But this implementing, and it's not possible to have a regulation which surpasses the remit of the law, which is superior to the law. It's not possible, and these facilities are operated by operators on the basis of calendar years, and 31st of October is the base year for good performance of this project, and next year you have to have applied the previous year for benefiting from those YECTEM prices. But if your facility, let's say, is commissioned in January 2018, so are you going to wait for 1/1/2019? According to the regulation, yes, but the law says otherwise. From the date of commissioning, that's the expression in the law. So the regulation now is in contrast with the law. That's what I'm saying. So the commissioning date or date of commissioning has to be taken as the basis in line with the law. I think it is the 16th Administrative Court of Ankara which ruled for a stay of execution. So the law and the implementing regulation has to be harmonized, which requires an amendment of the implementing regulation. Sabahattin, for example, we have a facility of 1 megawatts not licensed, and once you accepted that, you can benefit from 13.3 cents of YECTEM, and someone else goes, hydropower plant, establishes an hydropower plant for 30-something megawatts, commissioned 15th of November, and he cannot make use of that. He has to wait after 12 months. I think the regulation has to be harmonized with the law, no? Yeah, of course, this debate, well, that's about interpreting the regulation or the law, whatever. It is debatable, and the same law says that YECTEM operates on the basis of a calendar year, so it's January the 1st or the 1st of December. Well, I mean, Süleyman gives us a dramatic example. I mean, let's say you fail to commission on January the 1st, and I mean, 31st of October is passed. I mean, even if 1 day is gone. Well, EMRA has regulated this. Well, this year is not entered. I mean, even if that's January until December, it's not considered. You are working in the market, and it does not discount it from 10 years. That's the regulation. And on the basis of calendar years, that issue are the provisions in both laws, 5346 and 6436, both laws. Sabahattin, let me tell you this, in wind also, in order to be accepted under YECTEM, even if it's a single turbine, they want to erect a single turbine before 31st of October, and other turbines can follow in a couple of months. But it is great costs incurred. I mean, the cranes have to come and go again. So, in fact, at the first acceptance of these initial facilities, that condition 31st of October should not be sought. There is a budgeting within the framework of YECTEM. Yeah, for that budget, the state allocates a certain amount of budget, but for first time ever plants, this should not be sought. Yeah, of course, we are making a note of it, yeah. It has to be taken into consideration, yeah. You, gentlemen, at the back. Thank you. Nortel Electromechanics, Cem Yalçın. Sabahattin, 1 megawatt or above, a turbine of 1 megawatt or above, and the approximate manufacturing duration, including prototypes and certification, is about 1.5 years, 1.5 years, and maybe if you squeeze it, it's possible to do that in a matter of 1 year. But what I would like to say here, emphasize here, is similarly to what IFER has said, the hardest thing in Turkey is certification. We've been working on it, grappling with it for a lot of years now, and the Turkish Standards Institute will have completed the accreditation maybe tomorrow, maybe. I mean, the Turkish law, IFER has this opportunity, has this chance, and the costs here, the cost of a turbine, including tests and in Turkey transactions, is about 500, almost half a million Turkish liras, 550,000 Turkish liras. If you collaborate with international partners, the initial price that, I mean, the down payment has to be about 250,000, 300,000 euros, and if you're doing this abroad, I mean, it's a national advantage because it's covered by the state, but when you go to COSGAP, it gives you 7,500 Turkish liras. It's ridiculous. I mean, about domestication of the market, I think the Ministry of Energy and Natural Resources has to put his hand on the table. Maybe the ministry, there are solutions, nobody's working those solutions in this regard, but this is a great cost on the, you have one models, 500,000, and imagine you are manufacturing 5 models. I mean, this is the problem. I think we're looking for a solution in this regard for this problem. Thank you. We expect you to come up with a solution. Yeah, you have emphasized this once again. I remember. COSGAP support is minimal. And the fact that it is so is indicative of the novelty of our sector. 7,500 Turkish liras of support, it's nothing. Yeah, so we must talk to COSGAP. This is a special issue. We have to talk and discuss this, negotiate this with COSGAP. It can go up, or I mean, a special arrangement can be made for wind turbines. I mean, if the objective is to provide some support, market has to be taken into consideration. The market research has to be carried out. But please, in order to start the official process, you send us a letter, we send the letter to COSGAP, so that will be official. Well, we can have questions. I don't want to say last question, but I mean, we are running out of time. There's a cocktail and no meetings after that, so we can have questions if you have any more. Thank you. Thank you, first of all. Thank you all. My name is Tuna Güven from Borusan MBV Energy. My question is to Ahmet Tolma. You talk about foreseeability and say that it is important for project financing in post-2020. The loan agreements that are in place and the plans that are bound by such loan agreements, what the ECTEM price should be, you think, so that you would call the market a foreseeable one, so that the market is a foreseeable market for you. I mean, it's all about market prices. Our expectation is that it goes down. And for new auctions, new tenders, how would you deem that this market is foreseeable, that you're not increasing additional guarantees, that you're not increasing other ratios for you to be able to perceive this as a good market? What should be the ECTEM price? Thanks. Actually, in my speech, I have touched upon this issue. The ECA system is a good example in this regard, because if you have this project and you confide in your project, you trust your project, you have confidence in your project, and if you can reflect technological developments on your project, if you believe, then in the auction, your price at the end of the day will be a competitive one. Yeah, and this will naturally bring about, when we have the file in our hands as the banks, there will be a feasibility study. This is the capacity factor, this is the investment cost, and this and that. So that's why what I wish to emphasize, especially emphasize, is that we are not looking for a certain level of price. we are looking for a foreseeable cash flow, because at the end of the day, investors come to us with project files, and within the scope of the turbine supply agreement, my S-ring is this, so my savings is this, and the novel technologies, together with the novel technologies which will be used with the project, the capacity factor was normally 30%, here it is 40%. So these are, and for these reasons, they might tell us, the investors, in this auction, my proposal was 4 cents, and taking into consideration the cash flow, you can play around with it. Let's calculate, make our calculations, let's amend this and negotiate, and this is our price. And our feasibility model, the business plan, if the investor says that the financement is feasible to allow a project to stand on its feet, our own feet, our feasibility has to show this, has to demonstrate that it is so, that the project is capable to survive. In post-2020, we don't need YECTAM. I mean, it might, not be applied anymore, it's no problem. But speaking about each project, on a project basis, the price has to be foreseeable. We need foreseeable prices. And the greatest bump in the energy sector is this one. I mean, while you're doing this, the liberalization of the sector, our request is not to narrow it down. What our request is similar to many other examples I brought. For if you, in line with technological advancements and confiding in your project, when you create this feasibility and come up with prices accordingly, you have attained already an optimum price level. But apart from this optimum level of prices, if there's anything else, any mechanism that erupts, which causes an imbalance of prices, that's what I mean, that's what we don't want. I mean, we're not saying that it should be 7 or 4 cents. That's not what we are saying. It's not what I'm saying. What matters for us is, when we come to 2022, the storage technologies will have attained such advanced levels that, I mean, we don't know it now. Maybe the industry will be entirely in a different place, the investments and everything. So we'll see other prices, even lower prices, from coming out of these auctions. But at least to finance Project X or Project X, what we're looking for is the feasibility and foreseeability for 10 years, 15 years. We want to know and have trust in the level of prices for the next 10, 15 years. That's the basis of my loan for the project. Then I will be able to see the lowest level, the minimum thresholds that I could pull down the loans, the credit amounts, etc. And I will not be asking, for example, additional capital apart from the project finances. And at this stage, I cannot tell you this should be the price level. And your first question, in response to your first question, here's how I understand it. You're asking about facilities, the investments that have started, but which will be commissioned after 2020. Those are the things you are saying already commissioned or will be commissioned. So, if we're talking about the ones already commissioned, and that's in now after 2020, for example, I mean, if that's commissioned in 2018, you'll be using that until 2018. I mean, that's what I understand. Please correct me if I'm wrong, if I'm mistaken, but there's a retroactive working there, right? I mean, there will be no retroactive remedies, rectifications. Yeah, okay, good news. It won't happen. Okay, then. So that's why when we have new wind projects and working on financing those, and then we are assessing those, we are moving on this assumption, and we should not ignore this fact. For example, now, before us, we also have new extension projects. And in extension projects, you know very well, for example, project, if, for example, if that's after year 5 that they require an extension, it's something else, but we try to provide finances for as long a period as possible, because the financing burden of the initial project has depreciated, amortized, and without the feed-in tariff for the upcoming term, we can be more relaxed, more flexible, because basically what we look at is the reference amount.
Fiyat öngörüsü olmasa
And then we can act. I mean, we think about revenues from the project. If you're starting from zero, that's something else. I mean, if the project has not been amortized or depreciated, such a financing request, when we take that into consideration, we expect the same ratios for cash flow, and it doesn't add up. It doesn't add up. I mean, it's not 80 to 20, the ratio, capital and credit, or it's 40 to 60, and then it brings us to a point where we're asking for additional guarantees, additional capital, whatever. I mean, it's the scales of the way. And as the banks, we are trying to take as much responsibility as possible, I think, because when you look back in time, financing for the energy sector is about $50 billion, and 80% of that comes from Turkish banks, has come from Turkish banks. And today, where we're at, energy sector is the most financed sector in the banking sector, entire banking sector, and these loans, the finances, 40% by 40% go into these projects that don't benefit from the feed-in tariff mechanism. But now, today, at this place, we see this very clearly. At the time, many foreign banks when they said with long-term guarantees, we have taken that responsibility. They have refused, but we have not. We have taken those, and those projects are being restructured, almost all of them, unfortunately. And just like foreign banks have done 10 years ago, they have gone through the same thing. 10 years ago, we are going through the same place, same corridor, let's say, today. So, if we are expected to focus on renewable energy, then in that ballpark there has to be bankable structures like YEKA model, or for like YEKA model there has to be an investment environment created for these projects. Otherwise, licensed investments won't be bankable. I mean, at least it will be hard.
Ahmet Bey'e tekrar sizi
I would like to ask a question to Ahmet. You talked about financing of $50 billion, and previously you said that the source of money is modular, and so if you divide domestic and foreign resources, what is the ratio between them? And as you provide this financing, do you think that the origin of the turbine is important? Because I saw things like that, because if you produce a local turbine, the banks say that they do not have funding for this. This is something I personally wonder about. Thank you for the question. Let me clarify it. Especially for the wind projects, there is an optimum financing method. It's an import-based investment, and the investment cost, especially 70 to 75% of the investment cost, is based on the turbine costs, and therefore the relevant exim institutes such as Harness or others in Germany and other countries need to provide some guarantees, and the foreign banks provide the funding. However, the project risk is undertaken by the Turkish bank, and this was the financing method established. So what it means is that you have the cheap funding into Turkey, and the relevant institutions or agencies did not take the project risk, but the Turkish banks took the risk. If there is any thing wrong with the project, if it goes bankrupt, or if something wrong happens, then the Turkish bank will have to pay the money to the foreign bank. So this is going to be the risk. And when it comes to wind sector, we know that 4 billion out of $7 billion of financing provided up to now were acquired by this method. And we know that there are some cheap funding opportunities for Turkish banks, and those relevant banks directly funded Turkish banks, and the Turkish banks transferred these funds to the relevant investments on a back-to-back basis. And these were the cheap funds, and for the development of renewable energy sector in Turkey, they provided a great contribution. And we have the Turkish banks took the project risk. If there is something wrong with the project, it will be on our side, and we will be facing the problem. And here the funding was around $1 billion, and the remaining $2 billion were provided by the own funds of the Turkish banks, such as for procedures such as construction, etc. And sometime in the past, the funding cost was very good for the Turkish banks, and at that time, the long procedures of Exim Bank financing, investors chose Turkish banks to have all this funding from them. And when we look at the future, the period ahead, the scope of imports is limited for RECA, therefore the cash funding will be done by Turkish banks, not the Exim agencies or some other parties, foreign parties. And here, development banks will come to forefront. For instance, we have the Turkish Development Bank, which is a very good candidate because the Turkish Development Bank will get its funding from different development banks, such as the Islamic Development Bank or Asian Development Bank or European Investment Development Bank. And they will bring all these funds to Turkey. But this time, Turkish Development Bank will not undertake the risk of the project, but they will ask for collaterals from the Turkish banks. And it's again an optimum structure, because the commercial banks take the project risks, but the cheap funding is provided by the development banks. And for YECAS, I believe that this financial method or funding method will be really popular, and the capital market will be more active in the forthcoming period. We have the project bonds that will be used in future projects. We see them in infrastructure projects currently, and in the operating phase, in the commissioning phase, the loans in foreign currencies can be provided, and this way it will be possible to access cheap funding, because at the end of the day, the most important thing about the YECAS is that they are foreseeable and bankable. I mean, you don't care whether it's 3.5 or 7 or 10, but rather than that, for 10 to 12 years in commissioning, you have a foreseeable price mechanism, and this increases the credibility of the project. But other than that,
belirli bir fiyat öngörüsü olmayan projelerde
For projects that do not have a foreseeable price, of course there could be financing,
Türk bankalarının harici
but
garantisi olmadan
without the external guarantee of Turkish banks, I don't think that Exim Bank funding will be possible because, as I told you, Turkish banks will be expecting price prediction, therefore it will be a little bit difficult to pursue this funding method.
Ben hepinizi dinlediğiniz için çok
I'd
teşekkür
like to
ediyorum.
thank you all for your attention. I also would like to thank our panelists as well for their contribution.
Sertifikalarımız var. Ben
And now I would like to present the certificates prepared by TWEC.